Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. Wonderful to see you all. As always, it is Friday, and Jeff's got a lot to go into. We've got so many powerful energies coming up. We've got a new moon on the 17th. Venus is about to go retrograde, and so much more that Jeff's going to go into. And our topic today is about desire and hope. So let's get started, Jeff.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. And I would say the first thing, that I would like to talk about is there was a federal judge, I think it was Terry Dougherty, and I don't know if I'm spelling his name right, but he just gave the Biden administration and his handlers behind them a good blow. They basically have won a case, or the judge adjudicated, I don't know all the details, but it was basically a win in that the government can't make social media companies shut people's First Amendment rights down, because that is probably one of the most important things that any of us have in this Constitution. That is the right and the ability to express our opinions. I mean, why do you think they called it the First Amendment? It's probably the single most important thing is your right of expression of speech. So I like that. That was really wonderful that they were able to pull that one off. Now, I guess it's being appealed by the Biden administration. And one of the things that the judge cited is how insane the appeal was. It was like nothing in it that made any sense or had any valid legal arguments, because he's basically going against the Constitution. And, this is a theme that I've been saying that the astrology has shown for a long time. And that is, we're literally, forget George Orwell's 1984, where they want to take us, I think is far, far more scary. We're talking digital currency here, chips in the forehead or, in the bloodstream, the 5G, all the crazy stuff that this new one world order has got intended for everyone. And it's very subtle, but very, very powerful. So again, like we said on our 4th of July broadcast, you can't beat what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights has in it. And if this country is not maintained as the pillar of freedom for humanity, it's really scary. And it really truly is. And I think Biden and his administration, or his handlers above him, have demonstrated that they're not too interested in the Constitution at all. That's exactly what that federal judge said. And also, too, we know we just had Ray sit on the stand and basically treat the American people kind of like they're idiots by agreeing with everything that he could agree with, and then giving no comment to anything that, he was pinned down on. So I think, again, as we have said before, Ella, that we're going to see the Biden administration, the walls are closing in on this. We've got a new moon coming up here. It's coming right around the corner. I think it's right on
17th.
The 17th, yeah. The 17th at about 11:32 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Now, if you're on the East Coast or in Europe or in Australia, extrapolate accordingly. But, you just add, we're Pacific Daylight Time, which is 8 hours ahead. But what's interesting about this new moon is, new moons are really, this kind of relates to the topic today, how to keep insane thoughts and the crazy world from driving us insane, and keep our sanity, and keeping, some sense of reality in this new technological world. And I can tell you, new moons have a real powerful energy, and we're all on the internet. We're all around technologies. We're all staring at screens all day long. And it's really important, I think, to center ourselves. And no matter what they say about the celestial energies, they have a powerful, powerful influence. In fact, they've noticed the fluids in plants and animals and menstruation cycles, all these things, even the tides, are affected by the moon alone. So new moons are a great time to meditate, to refocus, set goals. And of course, they happen every month, obviously, right? And it's going to happen in a different house in your birth chart. So always pay attention. A lot of people are on the internet. Take a look at, where does that new moon happen in your chart? See, like mine will be happening in the 12th house. Well, what's that all about? Well, 12th house is always inner self, meditation, things that maybe inhibit you. It's also deep subconscious things and secret things that you may be wanting to bring out into the open. You're going to have it in the second house. The second house is what? Money. See, money and resources. You put your focus on how you're going to deal with that. So every one of us, if you run the houses around in astrology, there's 12 houses. Each one has an area of life. They're called the 12 terrestrial houses, and each one rules an area of life. Obviously, the seventh house is partnerships and relationships, right? The sixth is health, pets, small animals. The fifth is children or creative things, etc. So every month they're going to go around your chart, and you want to pay attention to where that is. I've always found that it has a subtle but extremely powerful energy for us to focus upon. And then right after this new moon, we've got a little bit of a dicey energy coming in. It's right around the 20th of July, and it's a Mars-Saturn opposition. Now, this happens every 2 years all the time and throughout our lives. In fact, Mars takes approximately 2 years to go around the entire chart. But, you have to look at, there's two types of astrology that you got to pay attention to. One is what's in the sky. And of course, what we're talking about, new moons and this Saturn Mars opposition is in the sky. But then you also have to look at how does that relate to your birth chart. And see, that really connects the dots into more how you're personally going to feel it. Like, I've had this discussion with a lot of people. There may be a great aspect going on in the sky, but they're not having a great time. Well, why? Because maybe that aspect is not forming well to their birth chart. Or I've also seen bad aspects or in-between aspects, and people are just cruising along doing fine. So it affects each one of us completely different. And that's where it's called synastry, where you look at the aspects in juxtaposition of what's going on in the sky to your birth chart. And it's really cool stuff. And again, it's all just energy. It's like driving down a road. You've got traffic coming at you, people interacting with you. And it's all the same thing. It's just energies. And I think anyway, we can take some Windex and clean off the windshield, which in this case is the astrological energy. The more we're going to probably navigate with a little more awareness. So it's interesting stuff. This Mars-Saturn opposition, which is happening on the 20th, might be a little bit dicey. Why? Because not only is that happening, but the moon is going to be conjuncting the Mars and opposing the Saturn, because they're in opposition. So that's all going to happen pretty much right around the 20th. So the 19th through maybe like the 21st, a little bit of a dicey time. But then again, it's happened before, folks. So it's not the end of the world, like everyone always thinks, every hard aspects. A lot of people predict the end of the world. I don't think the world's ending. But it's just, an energy that's coming up that we want to be aware of. I often find these hard energies like this, instead of being quote unquote bad, can actually be productive, because oppositions, if you examine it in astrology, they always ignite opposite energies like fire and air. Well, anybody working on a motor will tell you if you want combustion, you need air. So these are often considered to be volatile and bad when they're really just very energetic. And again, just like the art of war, if you understand these things, you can direct them to your benefit. And that's the way I like to look at this stuff. It's just energy. It's not, predicting the future and, the work of the devil and all this stuff. It's just real energy coming at us. And if we can be more aware of it, we direct it more positively. And that's the whole thing, because that relates a lot to the topic today too, where I really feel, it's so hard for so many people right now. They're on the internet, they're hearing the news. Of course, the news is always bad news, right? Once in a while, they'll throw a good one in there. But most of the time, we are inundated with negative stuff. We're always getting hit with taxes and bills and on and on and on. So these things are really, you could say, unnerving to normal consciousness. And, humanity is so much different than the animals. They actually say group spirits kind of run the animals. They operate more on intuition and instinct, where we have the free will. And that often can be a double-edged sword for us. And many people are turning to different things to find centeredness and happiness. And I've always been a fan of people who are, self-help coaches, so on and so forth. It's wonderful stuff, because one of the most powerful things in the world is the free will of the human mind. And when you look at the element of desire and hope, aspirations, goals, all these things generate what we call positive elementals emitting out of the third eye chakra. And science has yet to prove or disprove this. In fact, Dr. Emoto is the one who I think gave us probably the best proof of this. He proved when people would meditate over water, which he would freeze in a petri dish, and many people are familiar with him, and he called them messages in water. And now, he never referred to them as thought form elementals. I got a chance to meet him before he died. He was a wonderful man and very, very nice person. But thought form elementals is something that has been known by many, many mystics. Hermetic philosophy, of course, many people are familiar with the Kabbalah. The Egyptians were really into this. The Vedantic yogis always referred to them as samskara. So every culture of the world was very aware of the projectional, you could say, energy or etheric energy that we all emit. And I think one of the driving forces, just like voltage in a wire, is emotion and desire. You see this. You see it in a boxing match. You see it in business. You see it in every walk of life. People who are determined and people who are fired up. You see this in religious, meetings and so on and so forth. People who are fired up, they have a lot of voltage in their wire, so to speak. And again, this is positive thinking, or you could say, more importantly, goals and desire. It's the human spirit, something AI, I don't believe, will ever have. It can be programmed to act like it does, but you and I have that magic, which is the divine magic of desire and hope and force. And, even Hawkins, who was he put out a wonderful book called Power versus Force. And I always liked that book because one way of looking at psychology was the diagram that he has, and I'll put that on the screen, which basically goes from complete ineptitude or depression and suicidal feelings to elation, to bliss. And what I like about that scale is we're always dancing in between despair and bliss. And the balancing act, I think, for all of us is to stay in a place where we're comfortably productive. And, again, food and diet and all the stuff we're hit with, negative, thoughts and people coming into our lives, disrupting things, and also supportive people are so important. That's why we always like grandmas, right? And we always liked our grandparents. For the most part, they were always encouraging. They were older, they were wiser, right? Or we liked the older people. And I think a lot of that has been, in some ways, kind of looked past today in today's society. And, we're all relying on various sources of information. And it's really good on like a new moon coming up here to get centered with who we are and where we're going. Because fear is probably one of the most debilitating energies that there is. Anger is actually better than fear, because fear immobilizes you. And we have to remember that we emit out of the third eye chakra, not only the thought form elementals, but they permeate the curtain of our aura. And I always direct people to the book, The Magus Astrovolos. He actually speaks about the layers of the soul. You have the physical body, then you have what he calls the etheric double, then you have the psychic double, and then you have the noetic double. And they actually say there's 5 layers as it goes out. And I believe that that's true. And most of your ancient cultures are very aware of this. And what's really interesting about it all is who's at the center of it? Us. And that's why I think the most incredible thing we've been given is free will and our own minds to direct our thoughts. We almost have to treat. There was a great analogy that I saw in the Bhagavata and also the Bhagavad Gita. And they actually said that the lower conscious mind is like a team of horses, and up above it is the upper soul, or you could say the upper psyche, that's driving it. And if we lose control of that, and I have to say, one of the quickest ways to lose control is drugs, alcohol, bad food, and letting your emotions run awry. So we have to sometimes look in the mirror and pull the reins in, if you will, to use that analogy, or the steering wheel, whatever, the mouse, whatever you relate to make our minds steer back on track. So what do you think, Ella?
Yeah. No, I love everything that you're saying. And it's not that difficult to do when you really tap into it. What you're talking about is basic care of ourselves, taking basic good care of ourselves. And sometimes it feels really challenging. And other times it doesn't. But I find for myself, when it does feel very challenging, I watch my mind so closely, and I try very hard to redirect it. Just as you were saying a moment ago, you redirect the mind, because I feel like all this AI and all the technology where it's headed is almost designed to detach us from ourselves. It's designed for that. It wants us to detach from ourselves. And if we're cognizant of that, then it won't happen. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And we got to put the work in, we've got to put the personal work in. That's why I love new moons. Like you were saying, the new moon supports us in that, supports us in looking at ourselves and almost giving us a fresh start. And it doesn't matter really where it falls, which house it falls in, you still have that opportunity for a fresh start.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I love everything that you're talking about today.
Well, I mean, I think it's the centerpiece. When you look back, all the great masters always talked about all causation is mental. Many people in Christianity will recognize that exact statement in Sermon on the Mount. This is the same thing the yogis have said. This is the same thing the great rabbis have said. All causation is mental. And it's almost like a demonic force that is trying to break us down. And I wouldn't say it almost is. It is a demonic force. No question about it.
That's what I meant. Yeah, the AI and all the technology, that could be considered to be a demonic force for sure.
Yep. Sometimes when we just release and just let the universe come to us and meditate and keep open. And this is why it's such a dangerous time right now with the powerful drugs and alcohol that have been promoted on this planet forever. I mean, look at old Hollywood. Talk about a propaganda machine. Everything was whiskey, right? Or can I get you a drink, right? Drink was the antidote for everything. Cigarette, antidote for everything. And I think the further we evolve as a species, we're beginning to realize that stuff is really poison. I mean, half the Hollywood actors that we idolized years ago, they were all dead in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, it was all smoking and drinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some of them lived to be old age. I mean, Kirk Douglas was certainly one of the oldest ones. But I can tell you, I grew up around so much alcoholism in the Midwest. I mean, there's a bar on every street corner, and it's the highway to hell. I've seen it destroy family members, and just not a good thing. And that's the thing. The most valuable thing we got is not our bank account, even though that's important to be sure, but it's our minds. And the more we can do to keep that centered. And again, I'm not sitting here promoting astrology. That's just one tool that I like of many to keep us centered, to keep us rational. Just a point in case, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you just had a Mars opposition Saturn, and you were very frustrated. I could see that the last couple of days. And remember, I told you, I said, that's going to be over with, because I just happened to look, because I was looking at mine. And, you shifted so much the minute you knew that was there.
Yeah. Well, it always seems to be the case, right? I mean, it always seems to be the case, but no doubt, it's still frustrating. It's still hard. Certain aspects when they happen, when they occur, it's just the way it is, You bet. But, yeah. But I would love to just say it's our minds are so incredibly powerful, but so is the heart. And I like to try to combine the two, right? Very, very important.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because see, that's a term that I always like to blend in. See, that model, I'll put that on the screen again. That's the model of the breakdown using the ancient Hebrew of the lower conscious mind. In fact, Nadi astrology does the same thing. The moon and Mercury seem to be the amalgamation of intuition and logic combined. And that is referred to as the Nefesh in the Shari Hagilgam. The next is the Ruach or Rosh. Some people pronounce it differently, but it is the spirit acting on the physical life force of the body. And then you have the Neshama, which is the kind of, if you will, karmic control or subconscious mechanism that psychology likes to refer to, or psychiatry, of what's really above, or behind the curtain, if you will. That's the so-called subconscious driving forces. And I think the biggest problem we have is centering the lower conscious mind. And it's so influenced. I always say the lower conscious mind is like silly putty. I mean, just get around some music. Just play some music for a couple of days and it'll stick in your head. Anything, news we hear, people we talk to, phrases we hear. The lower conscious mind is literally like silly putty. Or it's like a hard drive. In fact, I've mentioned this before. In military procedures, if the enemy were to get a hold of military data and hard drive, they actually say it has to be erased like 32 times in order to get rid of all of the residual data prints. In other words, when you delete something on your hard drive, you think it's gone, right? You just put it in trash and you delete it. It's not gone. It stays there. In fact, I have programs. You can go in and you can retrieve your old data that was deleted back probably weeks if it hasn't been overwritten too much. And it's still there, it's still intact. Use that analogy for the conscious mind. It imprints things, trauma. In fact, this is one of the most important things. Chiropractors and psychologists who are removing traumas and phobias and habit patterns that we have, they're so deeply ingrained. In fact, in mind control, that was one of the most used techniques, was traumatize the person, and of course that's the carrot, the stick aspect too. You do this, you get pleasure. You do this, you get pain. And then they would insert various trigger points. Of course, we've seen a lot of movies like The Bourne Identity and many of these X-Men, films, and many, many other films have spoken about this. Well, that's all really true, in my opinion. And the more we realize that our minds are like that, they're like a hard drive. They hold the etheric energy. So we have to become mindful of that so that we can be the ones that can rewrite that data. Because, and this is something many of the great self-helpers have done, where you basically become senior to the lower conscious mind. And see, drugs, alcohol, toxins, bad habits, repetitive things, constant input without being aware of this are the poison that's going to keep allowing you to be at the effect of the world instead of at the control of your destiny, which is a big difference. It's a really cool difference.
Hope and desire. When I think about hope and desire, I do think about the heart, though, more than I think about the mind. I think about the heart behind the hope and the heart behind the desire. The mind.
You're getting into the soul, the upper portion that AI will never have. And that is the heart, the soul, the blessings that we were giving as spiritual beings who are really just having a really short sojourn in these bodies. It's not us.
That's right. That's right. And many times the mind gets in the way of that. And that's where we need to really watch
all the time. I know my mind gets in the way of it all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much for this. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for watching each week. Please leave your comments and your questions below, and have a beautiful week coming up. Enjoy the new moon. Take good care of yourselves.